why I do declare my noble band of outlaws. Sorry, my dad is Texan, so Southern by birth. In any case, even though I live in the North, since my father was basically raised in Texas, Southern by birth, fight me in the comments. In any case, it is time for the review, the long-awaited review, of the 1860 Heavy Cavalry Saber, or as it's more accurately, based off of the 1840 Heavy Cavalry Saber. Since the 1860 was the Light Cavalry Saber that ended up replacing this one. Now then, I have the Colt of Athena specs pulled up back there. I do not know where any of my measuring shit is for the moment, so there will be no measuring segment. I will just be saying what's on the Colt of Athena compared to this one. It's been a minute since I've done a sword review, so bear with me here. So the price is $212.50 to $279.99. The $212.50 is more than likely for a blemished version. Well, the $279.99 is what you're going to pay for a new one. So, let's begin. At the outbreak of the American Civil War, there were two types of sabers issued to the Federal Cavalry, light and heavy. The light version was popular, but the heavy model, dubbed the Old Wrist Breaker, which is the actual 1840, and the 1860 is the light model, as I said before, was the one with owning. It was a superior weapon. Its 36-inch blade offered big reach advantages over most sabers, and its substantial weight gave it the leverage to easily crush bones and sever limbs, or even a head with a single blow. The brass guard and 3 bars to protect the hand, and the grip was wire-bound leather and capped with a sturdy pommel. Its double-ringed steel scabbard, it could be easily attached to a saddle or to a belt. The Cold Steel 1860 U.S. Heavy Cavalry Saber features a sharpened 1055 carbon steel blade with a hard spring temper. The guard is brass with a leather cover. Wire-wrapped grip includes a steel scabbard with hanging rings. Specifications: overall length is 41 5/8 of an inch. Blade length is 35 1/2. It said 36 in the description, so it's missing a whole inch. The edge was sharp, it was serviceable. Width is 31.8 millimeters at the base. Oh, that's how wide the blade is, never mind. Its thickness is 8.6 millimeters to 3.2 millimeters, so it has a 0.5 millimeter taper as far as I'm aware. The pommel is of nut construction. The point of balance is 6 inches and 3/4 from the guard. Grip is 4 1/8 inch. Blade is high carbon 1055 type saber. Class battle ready. Manufacturer Cold Steel. Country of origin Guru, India. And I know I'm going to catch some shit for that. I joke, okay? Welcome to customer service. How may I help you today? Yeah, Outlaw's going to get shit for that. But in any case. So, time for the actual reviewing part of this sword. And I'm going to start with the pommel. And honestly, this pommel doesn't look like it was just bolted on. This fucker actually looks like it was peened. As in, they bolted that down and then they just peened over the rest. So it's actually both bolted and peened in place, which is a, honestly, superior way of doing it, because you get the torque from the bolt and then the peen locks everything in place. The brass doesn't take fingerprints easily, and it doesn't really smudge all that easily either. I know because of how much I've touched the brass and fiddled with it. Now, these edges, while they have been tampered and rounded over, they are still somewhat sharp. Not like cut you sharp, but they're sharp enough that if you hit them with your finger while using the sword, you'll feel it. The three-ring design of the guard offers a good amount of protection to the fingers and the knuckle. Not so much to the back of the hand, but again, this isn't a basket hilt either. This is a cavalry saber. Now, there's not much in terms of thumb protection, which I get it, you can't really have a full-on cutlass-style guard on a horse-based sword, a sword designed to be used on horseback, because in the heat of the moment you have to be able to just reach over and grab this thing. Any kind of basket hilt or full cutlass style guard will slow down the grabbing of the grip by a little bit. So basically you'd have to be able to just put your hand on it and draw. With a basket hilt, you actually have to with a basket hilt that's fully encased, you actually have to meticulously to a point, put your hand in the blade, which slows down drawing time. Now, if it was me, I would have actually made this section of the guard, if I was the one designing this sword, I'd have actually made this section of the guard bulge out a little more to protect the thumb, because the thumb is kind of exposed. You could argue that you're supposed to use the sword like this, in which case the thumb would be protected. But on horseback, you're more likely to come across people using a grip like this, because it facilitates allowing the wrist to move easier. With this grip, if the sword gets pushed back, there's a good chance of you breaking your thumb. With your thumb being here, if the sword gets pushed back, you get the full advantageous positioning of that thick pad on your hand to kind of be a force stopper. Now, I am not a master at saber, nor do I practice saber a whole lot. Alright? So, I can't fully say the benefits or disadvantages of having this style of guard, but it was used predominantly as the predominant military style saber of the U.S. cavalry in the 18th century for a reason. So I suppose that this style of guard was the most uniformed and least likely to cause problems. Now, with that being said, because this guard is the way it is, like all D guards, and when I say D guard, I mean because it has a D shape, it has the added advantageous ability of being used as a set of brass knuckles. Basically being able to punch somebody one moment and then simultaneously slash them the next. It's got a good amount of flex in the blade as well. It bends exactly where you want it to for a saber blade, up in the past the halfway point into the upper half of the blade is where its main flex is, which is what you want in a sturdy saber blade. As I mentioned in the unboxing, it actually has a double fuller similar to an Unokubi Zakuri, where you have the main fuller and then you have this secondary fuller that runs up the spine. Whether that's historical or not, I can't say. Again, I'm not an expert in saber. But just from holding it and wielding it and swinging it around, it's not a bad blade. This has a weight balance similar to a standard size katana, at least in my opinion. So, while it's not a super light blade, it does have a bit of weight to it, and it does have authority and presence in the swing. This blade is named Wrist Breaker for a reason, amply, because as I'm holding it, I'm already starting to feel a bit of exertion on my wrist. I'm already starting to feel it in my wrist and forearm region. Now, as I mentioned in the unsharpened cutting portion of the video, there was something that gave me reservations when I was cutting with this sword. And I mentioned I would talk about it here, and that is, I find the grip to be too slippery. Damn, I forgot the fan was on. It's not a sword review unless I stab the damn fan. And what I mean by that is, unlike the 1796, which I had no problem gripping, this wire wrap, at least with me, makes the sword feel too slippery in my hand. Now, me and Outlaw Spartan did some off-camera cutting with this sword. And I found something quite interesting. With a glove, I don't feel that slipperiness anymore. And I was able to get much better cuts, which is slightly understandable, as the cavalry of the era would have had and worn leather gloves as well when they were either riding a horse or just in general. They would always have a pair of leather gloves on hand as part of their standard kit. So with that in mind, I could see how wearing gloves would help mediate and even reduce entirely the slipperiness of the wire grip, because I have no reservation swinging this now with a glove in hand. And this is my non-dominant hand. With my dominant hand, that wire wrap is just too slippery for me to comfortably get good cuts on unless I am both in saber grip and white knuckling this thing. Like grabbing it like I'm trying to choke the damn thing to death, which stops it from becoming slippery in the hand. Now, it did have a similar issue that I've experienced with pretty much every cold steel saber up until now, and it didn't want to sharpen very well. It is now decently sharp. Is it razor blade hair popping short? No. But at least it's new $7 Walmart knife sharp, which I would say is a utilitarian edge. It has a utilitarian-like edge. And both of the cold steel sabers that I have owned have required me. I haven't done it with this one because it actually didn't require me to do this. But just like my Honshu swords that I rarely use, on the 1796 I had to take my angle grinder and grind away a lot of excess material near the edge so I could take it back to the workshop and finally get a decent edge on that thing. This one I was able to get with about 10 minutes on the workshop. And yes, while it's not the sharpest blade I own, it is sharp enough to cut. his name escapes me at the moment, the judge on Forge and Fire. It'll kill. Mark Makita. It'll kill. Or it'll cut. So, keep in mind that if you want to put a hair-popping sharp edge on these swords, at least the cold steel sabers, you may have to do a bit of grind work on it. Now, historically speaking, historical sabers from the period, they more than likely were not hair-popping sharp. They were more often than not ground to a decent axe-like edge. When I say axe-like edge, I mean like when you buy an axe straight from the store, it's got a very rough, toothy feel. It's not a razor blade, it's a serviced edge. Meaning it's sharp enough to do what it's supposed to do, not anything more, not anything less. That's where we get the term service sharpening from for historical military blades. They were service sharpened, meaning that they were just took into a grindstone, few passes on the grindstone. Yeah, this will cut off old Billy Bob's arm. Here you go. And that was that. Now they also suffered another critical weakness, which I'll get to in a moment. But yeah. So, in our modern day where we cut tatami mats and water bottles, we want that hair-popping edge. But in the old days where swords like these would have been, maybe they would have survived maybe 2 or 3 battles, a couple of skirmishes at most, and you would have just gotten a new one. Like, I could imagine like they would have like a couple of crates of these things just lying around in the forts, and whenever one would break or snap or get destroyed from a battle, they just pull another one out of the crate and be like, here you go, just be on your merry way. So people underestimate just how disposable swords were back in the days when they were prevalently used. These things were meant to be destroyed so that you were not. In today's world, swords are very expensive, especially good quality swords. Back in the day, while swords were still expensive, they were also more disposable. So, by and by. Now I mentioned it also had one other glaring weakness, and it's both a weakness and a benefit. And that is the scabbard, which I'm getting to now. So put the blade aside. I've already mentioned all the cons of the blade. It's the only main con of the sword is I find that the grip is a bit slippery, and now it may be more historically accurate. The blade edge is a bit thick, which doesn't take a razor sharp edge very well. Which is weird, because all the other cold steel swords, 2 or 3 passes on my workshop with each of the belt, and they're fucking just gliding through paper. Probably because the rest of them have a flat grind. Now then, onto the scabbard of the blade. As you can see, it has 2 metal hanging hooks. In Japanese, these would be called ashi, or hashi, one of the two. And the way that these would work is that you had 2 separate belts, one shorter, one longer, that would be then tied to a sword belt. The shorter belt would be up front, and the longer belt would be in the back. And the longer belt would wrap around the back of your thigh, going up across your ass cheek, back to your waist. And this one would just rest on the thigh, keeping the blade at a pretty stiff upwards angle. Sometimes it could be a slightly shallower angle, but most of the time the angle of choice was right here. And there was other often times where they wouldn't actually have the secondary belt attached. So what could be done is that you're holding the blade like so. But you could also flip the sword around so that the butt end of the scabbard is facing outwards towards you. And this was done to make walking easier, because there were actual reports of soldiers getting tripped up by their own scabbards because of how low on the ground they would actually hang. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would get tripped up by their own scabbards, because remember, if my arm is the waist, these swords were hung much similar to this. Again, sometimes like this, but most of the time they were hung like so. So it's quite easy for me to understand that they could have gotten tripped up by their own scabbards. Incidentally, that's why this little piece is on here. This was designed to slide across the ground, because sometimes, a lot of times when these were worn and you were walking, the scabbard end would butt and bounce against the ground, and that could actually cause the weld to open up. So to mitigate this problem, they actually put this piece of metal here. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to call it a butt cap for right now. So they put the butt cap on here so that as you're walking, the butt cap is what bounces along the ground, or in some cases just slides across the ground to help protect that weld and keep it sealed. Now, a steel scabbard has a few advantages. One, it's made of steel, so not only is it far more durable than a wooden scabbard, if push comes to shove, you can take this thing off your belt and beat the living shit out of somebody with it, because it's essentially a steel pipe with an almost axe-like focus point at the end. Meaning that, similar to an axe, in the regard of its similar to an axe in regards of a shape, you are focusing all that contact, all that striking power, while it's thick as hell, on a smaller surface area of an edge. Meaning if this is swung hard enough, let's say at somebody's skull, you could crack the skull open quite easily with something like this. Or if you, and I don't know if this was done historically, I highly doubt it was, because this is more of an anime thing. You could use the scabbard to block an incoming sword strike and then make your own sword strike. Or you could even use this to like parry a bayonet and then stab a motherfucker from up top. And then naturally all you'd have to do is just sheath the blade again and take your badass weeaboo pose. Now, I mentioned that this was both a pro and a con. The con of a steel scabbard is if you don't draw the sword out in a very particular way, let's say as you're drawing the sword out, you cant that bitch up. Unlike a wooden scabbard, which would get cut through, or just have a small sliver taken off, or just like a little gouge made into it, this bitch will completely dull your sword in one bad draw. And this is an actual historical thing where it was recorded by soldiers that the metal scabbards were blunting their blades as they were drawing them. So you actually have to know how to physically draw this sword, or any military sword in a metal scabbard. And now I can't not unsee wanting to make a paracord wrap for right here, so I can use this as both a sword and parry weapon. I'm doing that now. I have a handguard on this. I can just use the ring as a cross guard. Use the ashi as a cross guard. Now, it does not have the best retention. A few good shakes and it comes out. But it does come out relatively easy enough that if I had to quick draw it, I could. And here's something that I'd like to mention, that a lot of sword tubers, I don't think, quite understand this. You cannot equate the fit between a habaki and a koiguchi on a Japanese katana to the fit of a European longsword or a European style military sword. The reason is that the habaki and koiguchi are purposely designed and shaped to seal when they are fully interlocked with each other. Most of the time, for European swords, especially in history, a sheath was just there so that you could A, carry the sword conveniently, and B, not cut yourself. You could put a live blade through your belt and walk around town just fine, but then you also have a live, sharp piece of steel walking around. Accidentally bump into somebody, you could cut their leg, you could cut yourself, you could cut your belt off, drawing the son of a bitch. So, the only reason scabbards exist in the first place is A, ease of carry, and 2, protection for yourself and others. And the Japanese katana was purposely designed to be as airtight as possible. Europeans, on the other hand, had the belief that if it holds the sword and I can get the sword out easy, it's good enough. Alright? It's basically form over functionality. And military sabers share this as well. They are not supposed to be so tight or so perfectly fitted and married to one another that it forms a perfect seal. No, that's what another piece on this sword is for that I'm getting to in a moment. These are purposely designed to be drawn as quickly as possible and to be basically as durable as possible, so that whilst in the heat of battle, if you lose your saber and you have no other means of defending yourself than to take your scabbard and beat a son of a bitch with it, there you go. Now, I mentioned that there is actually a part on military sabers from the past that mirrors a koiguchi and habaki fit, and that is the mouth of this scabbard and this leather washer. See, these leather washers are common on the swords, military sabers, because when you sheath the blade, the washer not only helps protect the brass from getting scratched up by the steel scabbard, but you'll notice that there's a flare on the scabbard. This is what forms the watertight seal in this instance, and helps keep water and rain out from the scabbard, causing both blade and scabbard to rust from the inside out. Now, I'm not saying that in today's modern world that we shouldn't expect quality for our money. We should, but we can't go comparing the Japanese katana's fit and finish to all other swords' fit and finish. Alright? I can't compare my what's my fanciest sword? I can't compare my Balo Arms Bayako fit and finish to this, because the fit and finish for this is done to historically replicate the original fit and finish, especially since these were mass produced in factories at the time. Alright? Basically, whenever these were sent out, they had to be able to meet the same exact specifications every time. Same blade shape, same geometry, same tang construct, same tang and pommel construct, tang shape, grip and pommel construction, everything. So that as soon as the parts were cast and cleaned up, they could just be fitted together and shipped out. Meaning that, let's say you did break a blade, then the weapon storehouse keeper could basically just pull out a sword by itself and give you the sword and keep the scabbard on hand in case somebody broke their scabbard or their scabbard rusted or what have you, or they would just give you the combo together. These are military blades. They are designed to be the most bare-bone, basic, simple, arm as many fuckers as we can and send them into battle weapons as possible. Alright? Everything military is purposely built to do two things: be damn near indestructible and simple. The only comfortable branch of the military is Air Force. Alright? At least as far as I'm aware. So, with that in mind, I hope you enjoyed the review. I know it's been a long one. We went on a huge-ass tangent. But, in conclusion, for $300, whether you want to get a blade for reenactment purposes, or you want to actually cut with a authentically shaped and made version of the 1840, 1860 heavy U.S. cavalry saber, or what have you. Whether you're going to use this for reenactment purposes, pirate cosplay, for $300 or backyard cutting, you really can't go wrong. It's sturdy, well made. You will have to do a bit of work to get a hair popping edge, but that can also be par for the course of a lot of swords. I don't really have a lot of cons about this sword except for the fact that the grip is slippery without gloves. So I would recommend wearing a set of leather gloves when cutting with this. If you don't find it slippery, then all the more power to you to raw dog this thing barehanded. But with that in mind, I can actually recommend this sword for the larger consumer audience: cosplay, reenactment, cutting, all that. It's not going to break the bank, but it is on the higher end of the budget spectrum, especially for 2024, 2025, where fucking eggs are $5 a carton. Yeah. So, until next time, I know we'll bat about laws. Outlaw Samurai tells all y'all be crazy rednecks. Be safe and use your weapons. I'm out. Peace. And this is a 9.5 out of 10. I can recommend. Loses a half a point for the slippery grip.